You can't just kick us out. We're family, my sister scoffed after breaking into my house. I dialed 911. 3 months later, I received an unexpected text from her. At 28, I finally achieved my dream of homeownership, something I'd worked towards since I was 19, saving every penny and living in cramped apartments with roommates. For nearly a decade, I'd sacrificed nights out, vacations, and even basic comforts to squirrel away enough for a down payment in today's brutal housing market. Little did I know that my proudest moment would turn into a family nightmare that would force me to choose between my boundaries and my blood. I've always been the responsible one in my family, the one who plans ahead and takes the practical path. My sister Sandra, 32, has been the opposite, impulsive, emotional, and perpetually in need of rescue. Our parents have always rushed to her aid, often at my expense. When Sandra dropped out of college, they used my tuition money to help her get an apartment. When she got pregnant with her first child, they pressured me to let her stay in my one-bedroom apartment until she got back on her feet. Each time I tried to establish any boundary, I was labeled selfish, cold, or unloving. Family helps family was their mantra, but somehow I was always the one doing the helping, and they were always deciding what form that help should take. 2 years ago, Sandra married Greg, a man who couldn't keep a job for more than a few months. They had a second child despite being financially unstable, and as usual, my parents stepped in to support them. I kept my distance, focusing on my career in software development and saving for my house. I didn't share my financial goals with my family. Experience had taught me they'd only see my savings as a resource to be tapped for Sandra's needs. The day I closed on my house was one of the proudest moments of my life. A modest 3-bedroom ranch in a nice neighborhood, with a yard and enough space to grow into. After years of living with roommates and making do with minimal space, I finally had a place to call my own. I spent the first night on the floor in a sleeping bag, surrounded by empty rooms, and felt nothing but pure joy. I decided to share my news at our monthly family dinner, expecting at least some congratulations before the inevitable criticism about not consulting them. As I announced my purchase, there was a brief moment of what seemed like genuine happiness. Then I noticed the look that passed between my parents, the way my father's eyes narrowed slightly. "How many bedrooms did you say it had?" my father asked, his voice casual but his eyes calculating. "3," I replied, still naively excited to share the details. "And a nice backyard for summer barbecues." "That's perfect timing," my mother said, setting down her fork deliberately. "Sandra and Greg just found out they have to be out of their apartment by the end of the month. Their landlord's selling the building." My stomach dropped as I began to realize where this was heading. Before I could respond, Sandra jumped in, her voice high with rehearsed enthusiasm. "It's like it was meant to be. The kids are so excited about having their own rooms. Tyler's already planning how he'll decorate his." I sat there, fork frozen halfway to my mouth, as my family continued discussing my house, as if it were a communal property they had decision-making rights over. They had already decided that Sandra, Greg, and their 2 children would be moving in with me. Not asked, decided. "Wait," I finally interrupted, my voice sharper than intended. "This is my house. I never agreed to any of this." Table fell silent. My mother's face hardened in that way I knew all too well, the expression that preceded emotional warfare. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us," she said quietly. "Your sister has children, Luke. Are you really going to let your own niece and nephew be homeless?" What followed was 2 hours of emotional manipulation so intense it left me physically exhausted. By the time I drove home, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. But something had shifted in me. Perhaps it was the years of therapy, or maybe it was the tangible symbol of independence my new house represented. But I found myself unwilling to capitulate this time. The next 2 weeks were a barrage of guilt trips, manipulative texts, and tearful phone calls. My mother sent daily updates about Sandra's children, how scared they were about not having a home, how they cried when they thought about having nowhere to go. My father took a different approach, alternating between cold silence and fiery accusations of selfishness. Sandra herself sent pictures of the kids looking sad, sometimes with captions like "wondering where we'll sleep next month." At first, doubts crept in. Was I being unreasonable? Wasn't family supposed to help each other? I called my friend Marcus, who had witnessed much of my family dynamic over the years. "They're manipulating you, man," he said bluntly. If they were asking to stay for a week while they found a new place, that would be one thing, but they're trying to move in permanently without even asking. That's messed up. His words strengthened my resolve. I sent a clear message to my parents and Sandra. I'm sorry about your housing situation, but moving into my house is not an option. I'm happy to help you look for affordable apartments or contribute to a security deposit on a new place. The response was immediate and vicious. My father called not to discuss alternatives, but to inform me I was no longer welcome at family gatherings. My mother sent a text that simply read, "I never thought I raised such a selfish child." Sandra didn't respond at all. A week later, I met my cousin Zach for drinks. We'd always been close, the only family member who seemed to understand the dynamic I was trapped in. After his third beer, he leaned in with a troubled expression. "I need to tell you something," he said, lowering his voice despite the noisy bar. "They're planning to move in anyway." My blood ran cold as he explained that Sandra, Greg, and my parents had devised a plan to essentially force their way into my house. They had a copy of my spare key, taken from my keyring when I was in the bathroom during the family dinner, and planned to move in while I was at work. Once they were established with the children settled, they believed I wouldn't have the heart to evict them, especially since eviction processes could take months. Greg was bragging about it to my brother, Zach said. "They're planning to do it next Tuesday when you have that all-day meeting you mentioned." I felt physically ill. The betrayal was staggering, but the methodical calculation behind it was worse. This wasn't an emotional reaction. It was a coldly planned invasion of my home and life. The next morning, I called in sick and made 2 appointments, one with a locksmith and one with a lawyer. The locksmith changed every lock in the house and installed a security system with cameras covering all entrances. The lawyer advised me on my rights as a homeowner and helped me draft a formal notice to my family, stating clearly that they did not have permission to enter my property and any attempt to do so would be treated as trespassing. I delivered the letter personally, watching as my father's face reddened with each line he read. My mother tried to interrupt, but I remained calm. "This isn't a discussion," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've changed the locks, installed security cameras, and informed the neighbors to call me if they see any of you at my house. I've also filed a report with the police indicating I've received information about a planned illegal entry." My mother burst into tears, a tactic that had worked consistently throughout my childhood. "How could you treat your family this way? Those children—" "Those children have parents," I interrupted. "Parents who are responsible for finding them appropriate housing, not by stealing mine." I left feeling both terrible and triumphant. The guilt was still there, ingrained by years of conditioning, but alongside it was a new emotion, pride in standing up for myself. Tuesday came, and despite my preparations, I was a nervous wreck. I worked from home, jumping at every sound, checking the security camera feeds obsessively, but nothing happened. No moving truck, no family members testing the locks, nothing. I began to think perhaps my direct approach had worked, that they had finally understood my boundaries. That illusion shattered the following Saturday. I had gone grocery shopping early in the morning, enjoying the simple pleasure of buying food for my new kitchen. I was only gone for about an hour, but when I pulled into my driveway, I saw an unfamiliar moving truck parked on the street. My heart pounding, I ran to my front door, grocery bags forgotten in the car. The door was open. Somehow they had gotten in. I stepped inside to find my living room partially filled with boxes and furniture I didn't recognize. From down the hallway, I could hear children's voices and the sound of Sandra giving directions to Greg. They had broken in. While I stood frozen in shock, Tyler, Sandra's 6-year-old son, came running around the corner. "Uncle Luke," he exclaimed, oblivious to the situation. "Mommy says I get the blue room." Sandra appeared behind him, her expression shifting from surprise to something like smug satisfaction when she saw me. "You're home early," she said, as if I had interrupted a birthday surprise rather than a home invasion. "We wanted to be more settled before you got back." "How did you get in?" I managed to ask, my voice strangled. "Dad had a locksmith come," she replied casually. "He showed them old family photos of us together from his wallet and said he was your father who had locked himself out while checking on your house during your business trip. He even had mail with your address that Mom took from your car during that family dinner. The locksmith never suspected a thing." The casual way she admitted to the deception knocked the wind out of me. Behind her, Greg appeared, carrying a box labeled kitchen. He gave me a nod as if we were neighbors passing on the street. "Where do you want this?" he asked Sandra, completely ignoring the fact that I was standing there, clearly in shock. "Get out," I said, my voice low but firm. "All of you get out now." Sandra rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Luke. The kids are already excited about their rooms. You can't just kick us out. We're family." "This is illegal," I said, pulling out my phone. "You broke into my house. I'm calling the police." Greg stepped forward then, his body language suddenly threatening. "You wouldn't call the cops on your own sister, on your own niece and nephew." "Watch me," I replied, already dialing. What followed was 30 minutes of chaos. Sandra alternated between begging me not to involve the police and screaming that I was a monster who wanted children to be homeless. Greg threatened me physically, then backpedaled when I recorded him. The children, confused and frightened by the adults' behavior, began crying. When the police arrived, my family immediately tried to frame it as a family misunderstanding. The officers, to their credit, were unmoved. They verified my ownership of the property, confirmed I had not given permission for anyone to enter or live there, and informed my family they would need to leave immediately. The senior officer pulled me aside while his partner supervised the removal of their belongings. "Sir, we're filing this as an illegal entry and trespassing," he said quietly. "Given that they're family members, we're not making arrests today, but this incident will be documented. If they attempt anything like this again, there will be more serious consequences, including potential criminal charges. I recommend you pursue a restraining order if you feel it's necessary." "But we have nowhere to go," Sandra wailed, clutching her children dramatically. "Ma'am, that's not your brother's responsibility," the older officer said firmly. "You can't break into someone's home because you need housing. There are proper channels for emergency shelter if you're truly without options." As they were escorted out, my mother arrived, having been called by Sandra. She rushed past the police to confront me on my own front porch. "How could you do this?" she hissed, her face contorted with anger. "Those children will remember this day forever. They'll know their uncle chose his precious house over them." "No," I replied, finding a calm I didn't know I possessed. "They'll remember that their parents put them in this situation, that their parents broke the law and used them as emotional pawns." The police supervised as they loaded their partially unpacked belongings back into the moving truck. Throughout the process, my family members alternated between pleading, threatening, and attempting to shame me in front of the officers and neighbors who had inevitably gathered to watch the spectacle. Before they drove away, my father approached me one last time. "You are no longer my son," he said, his voice cold. "Don't bother coming to family events. Don't call your mother. You've made your choice." That night, alone in my house, I felt an overwhelming mix of emotions: relief, grief, anger, and a strange sense of liberation. I changed the locks again, upgraded the security system, and spent the evening sitting on my empty living room floor, surrounded by the space that was truly mine. The weeks that followed were difficult. True to their word, I was excommunicated from family gatherings. My parents told extended family that I had cruelly refused to help my sister when she needed it most, leaving out the part about breaking into my home. Some relatives took their side, flooding my phone with disappointed messages. Others, who had witnessed the pattern of favoritism over the years, reached out privately to offer support. I threw myself into making my house a home. I painted rooms, bought furniture piece by piece, and planted a garden in the backyard. Each improvement felt symbolic, a reclaiming of my space and autonomy. 3 months after the break-in, I received an unexpected text from Sandra. It was brief. "Found an apartment through community housing program. Kids are settled in school nearby. Still think you were wrong, but it worked out." No apology, no acknowledgement of the violation, but it was something. I stared at the message for a long time, a knot of complicated emotions forming in my chest. This was my sister, the same girl who had braided friendship bracelets for me when we were kids, who had once punched a bully who was picking on me in elementary school. Somewhere along the way, our relationship had twisted into something unrecognizable, warped by our parents' favoritism and years of enabling her dependence. I felt a sudden, intense grief for the relationship we might have had in a healthier family. In another life, I might have helped her find housing willingly, might have had her kids over for weekend sleepovers, might have been the uncle who taught them to ride bikes and build science projects. Instead, we were strangers connected by blood and trauma, suspicious of each other's motives. I typed several responses, angry ones, forgiving ones, indifferent ones, and deleted them all. Eventually, I settled on, I'm glad the kids are settled. I hope the program is helpful. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. A tiny bridge across a massive chasm. A month later, my mother called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. I'm not calling to apologize, she said immediately. But your father and I discussed it, and we think enough time has passed. We're having Thanksgiving dinner at 4. You can come if you want. No recognition of boundaries crossed, no accountability for their actions. Just a grudging invitation back into the fold as if nothing had happened. Thank you for the invitation, I said carefully, but I've made other plans. It wasn't true, but at that moment, I decided it would be. I called friends who had supported me through the ordeal and organized a chosen family Thanksgiving at my house. For the first time, I hosted a holiday gathering in my own home, surrounded by people who respected my boundaries and celebrated my achievements. 6 months after the break-in, I remain largely estranged from my immediate family. We communicate sporadically and superficially. My parents have never acknowledged the wrongness of their actions, though they have stopped explicitly trying to override my decisions. Sandra and I have had one coffee meeting, awkward but civil, where she admitted that the community housing program had actually been beneficial for her family, providing resources beyond just shelter. The house continues to be my sanctuary. I've filled it with color, comfort, and carefully chosen possessions that reflect who I am. Sometimes I still feel pangs of guilt. The programming of a lifetime doesn't disappear overnight, but they're fainter now, overshadowed by the peace I feel in my hard-won space. I've learned that sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people who should respect them the most. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary, and that my house keys represent more than just my property. They represent my right to decide who has access to my life. The spare key now belongs to Marcus, the friend who stood by me when my family would not. He uses it only in emergencies and always with explicit permission, a simple courtesy my own blood couldn't extend. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my family. Healing seems possible but distant, contingent on a recognition of wrongs that may never come. What I do know is that I've found a different kind of family among friends who celebrate rather than undermine my independence. And in my quiet house, with walls I painted myself and a garden I tend with my own hands, I've found a peace I never knew was possible.